Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Koropati from Cambrian Lab. With me is my colleague Manish Mathur, and we also have a guest joining in the second half of this session. So today's session is around master data management for supply chain excellence, and we have several topics on the agenda. And we start off with a brief introduction about the panelists, about us, and what we observe with respect to master data and supply chain excellence. And then we have several topics that we'd want to cover today at a high level, and some of them in a deeper uh, perspective. Uh, Many of our customers come to us in the goal with the goal of improving supply chain excellence. And what we have seen is that there is a process for getting started, and master data is one big part of the equation there. Often you also have to build a business case about why do we need master data process improvement for achieving supply chain excellence? And we'll go into a little bit of details about that. What is different about supply chain master data? There are a lot of master data approaches which currently are used by many organizations. We think they are not exactly the right match for supply chain master data. We'll look into those details. Another aspect that comes up quite a bit as people are uh, embarking on digital transformation, AI, data excellence is, how do we get to a state of perfect master data and remain there? So we call it the pursuit of perfect master data. And often, once you are done with process improvement initiatives, you need to be able to validate that you have achieved your goals and what was promised, and what are some of the techniques to do that. So and then we're going to leave the last 10 minutes for Q&A. So as we are covering these topics, we will be interspersing with a few of the demos and also perspective from our guest joining, especially in the last two areas, because they've done some amazing work there. So we will look into all of these in more detail as we go through the session. In terms of Zoom logistics, as the session is happening, you might have some questions. What we highly recommend is that you type in your question in Q&A. We would like to answer those questions in the last 10 minutes of the session so that we have some continuity. So the best would be if you have a question in the middle as the session is going on, just type it into the Q&A, and we'll come to the Q&A section in the last minute and last 10 minutes and answer those questions. If there are any questions that are left unanswered, we will always answer via email and as part of the session materials as well. So with that, one more thing. We will be sending the recording and presentation after the session is completed, so you have all the material if you wish to reuse it for any other purpose. Okay, so today's panelists are, I'm Chris Koropati. I'm responsible for customer success at Cambrian Lab. We also have Manish on the call, who is head of our engineering at Cambrian Lab. And in the second half of this session, we will have Justin Williams from Edgewell Personal Care. He's responsible for solution enablement at Edgewell and has a wealth of knowledge and experience with master data management. Okay, a brief intro about Cambrian Lab. We provide solutions for supply chain excellence. We are based out of California, Texas, and Midwest, and most of our customers are heavy in terms of manufacturing and supply chain. So we do have quite a bit of experience working with them on operational aspects and technology with respect to supply chain excellence. Okay, and that includes ERP, planning and manufacturing systems, and sourcing and finance and so on. So we'll see a lot of that slant in our session today. Some of our example work that we do in master data excellence. So we cut across several industries. The one common theme is um, supply chain master data is central to what we do, and that's our focus and expertise lies there. So you will see a lot of materials and suppliers and new product introductions and so on. So that's our core competency. So anything to do with supply chain master data, we probably have seen it, touched it, and improved it. Okay. And so when we think of supply chain master data and the importance of actually having good and timely master data is, we are looking at a lot of different uh, master data domains as well as elements of that master data. There is some terms that are used normally are primary master data like material, customer, supplier. That would be primary master data domains, but there are secondary data with respect to materials includes BOMs and recipes and costing and pricing, right? Manufacturers, approved manufacturers, production versions, if you're coming from SAP side. So there's a lot of additional master data that you have to work with and improve if you really want to excel from a supply chain process perspective. Right? And supply chain touches both from the front, the customer facing supply chains, as well as supplier facing supply processes as well, right? So, it covers the whole span of an organizational um, processes if you're a manufacturing organization. And to a lot of people and a lot of organizations, supply chain processes are centered around new product introduction, sales and distribution, S&OP, production, logistics, and there are many, many, many business processes. And the important thing to keep in mind is that master data is pretty much the backbone of all of these supply chain processes. You have to get the master data right if you want to support supply chain excellence initiatives. And the other thing that we have noticed is a lot of times, why do people come to us, right? And there has to be some uh, notion of, hey, we need to improve, or there is enough pain that we need to do something about it. And a lot of times that pain is represented aside, if you think of the business teams that are relying on this master data, right? Sometimes there's delays in product launch. And if you're today, every day, we are working with many of our customers on export compliance and export control, commodity issues, right? So all of that, either, there is a very strong notion of we need to improve it, or we have enough pain that we need to do something about it. So that's the reason why, master data can make or break supply chain processes. If everything is working well, you don't need to do anything. But if you see issues, master data representing as issues in the business process, these are the types of places where you will find it. Okay. And so the next, given the centrality of master data from a supply chain excellence perspective, you have to often think about, hey, we need to really improve the situation here, right? Or we have enough pain that we need to address this. The question then becomes, how do we get started with supply chain master data excellence, right? What are the steps that you can take? So when we look at supply chain master data excellence, what are the starting points for something that you should be doing? Number one is you need to know where you are at. What is the state of your supply chain master data? So which means you need to at least understand what is going on with respect to supply chain master data. And that would be, you can do that with supply chain master data assessment. We'll look at a couple of techniques for that. And assessment of processes that create and update master data. One of the fundamental issues that we see is the complexity and the pain of these processes that create and update master data, right? The cost of some of these processes is pretty high. So there is a lot of improvement. And in fact, we even counter that the processes are probably where you really need to focus on from an improvement perspective. And that should take care of your supply chain master data in itself. So if you think about supply chain master data, you need to really know, what is our core master data? What is the status of that? And obviously in master data, many of you know that there are some standard approaches to evaluate what is the state of master data. That can be accuracy, validity, uniqueness, consistency, completeness. I think those are, we call, good basic uh, facets of master data that you can measure and at least get an understanding of where your master data is. But we think there is a little bit more, especially when it comes to supply chain master data, that you need to apply. One is, um, so you need to be able to assess, how do we assess, how do we get to a number where we know, for example, in this case, you're looking at finished goods. Now, how good is our finished data, right? So in addition to standard, what we call, it's a pretty common industry, very data-oriented terms like completeness, uniqueness, and there are ways to measure that. There's more than one way to measure that, and we'll see some techniques for that. Validity, but you also need to start thinking in terms of business, right? Now, are we ready for sales? What does that mean, right? What does that even mean? Yeah, completeness is good, but how about sales readiness? How about production readiness, right? So these are the things that you have to start thinking about when you think of supply chain master data, right? And measure and improve upon these facets of master data, right? So those are some of the things that you need to think about. Um, the other thing, when we are thinking of assessing supply chain master data, we talked about completeness, hierarchy. These are traditional metrics in terms of how to evaluate master data, right? And if you want to get to some one number that you want to work with, you need to be able to provide some importance to these dimensions, right? And here, as you can see, the highest importance is given to actually sales readiness. The reason being, it is a finished good. And since you're going to be manufacturing that, you also need to think about production readiness, whether it is internal manufacturing or you're using contract manufacturers, doesn't matter. And now when you start thinking in finished goods perspective, if you think of completeness, we're just giving you some examples here, right? So you need to have sales text in all languages. You need to have pricing conditions set up, right? You need to have proper commodity codes. For financial reporting, you need to have proper hierarchies set up, right? One of the pernicious aspects, things that can happen for master data, especially for finished goods, is potential duplicate, because that can create a lot of problems, especially if you're trying to do a new product introduction and there's something that's already there and close enough, right? So you need to check all of this. So this is one approach that we've found it to be very useful to understand, is to have some assessment frameworks, and you apply these assessment frameworks to evaluate. Now, all of this at the end, sales text in all languages, where does that come from, right? How do we measure? So you'll have to, we use a internal query mechanisms, etc., to go into ERP systems or supply chain planning systems or even your e-commerce systems to understand, hey, is everything in place? And if you have 1,000 finished goods, how many of them are fully fulfilling this rule? And if there are any failures, what to do about it, right? So we'll look at that a little bit later on. But you need to have a good sense of what are the dimensions and what are the aspects of those dimensions that make up for a good master data assessment. And again, there is no such thing as we can do a master data assessment for materials. I mean, as you know, you have 5 different or 10 different types of materials that you're routinely using. The master data assessment that can be used for purchase parts is definitely not the same that you can use for finished goods. So you need to be able to differentiate and use the correct assessment framework to evaluate and get to a good place in terms of understanding what is the current state and where do we need to improve. Okay. And the second thing that, this is obviously we are looking at master data as of today, right? When you are already are a working organization that has been for many years, so you have to really look at it. It is what it is today, but we just need to understand the state of our current master data. Okay. Now, following that, you also need to do a master data process assessment. Okay, so this is an example of an NPI material, finished goods. So we need to understand, at least before you embark on an improvement initiative, what is the process that we are using today to set up NPI materials? And that could be different for purchase materials. It could be different for spare parts. It could be different for service materials and so on, right? So, but at a minimum, you need to know what is the process we have today and approximately, or you can use a variety of techniques, visual mapping and process analysis. So you can do that to understand how long is it taking and what is the cost and what is the waiting time. You can even go further and say, what is the non-value added activity? And somebody, if one example that we think of is very, very common is a spreadsheet goes out, people, and at this stage, people will provide information, with some checks and balances, sometimes without any checks and balances. And it comes to somebody, and somebody goes to the ERP system, planning system, manufacturing system, and typing in the data in there. So it's the process that they use, right? So these are the steps that are involved. And you need to know, okay, this is the situation. How much improvement potential can we achieve, right? And then there are a variety of ways to try to get to it. But as a business, you have a goal, right, to get to if we want to improve our processes. So you need to really look at, we need to improve our master data and we need to improve our master data processes because these are the ones that are going to be used to uh, improve the situation today and going forward. So this is another example of, this is like a split process, right? Where you think about initiate and then master data creation, right? So these are all the different steps involved. So you need to understand what is it currently taking? How do we do it today? And what is the improvement potential? Right. So if it is the 35-day process here, is it the business ask is we need to really get it to 3 to 5 days. How do we do it? Okay, so that's the thing. So one thing about master data processes is they're more than what you imagine them to be. There are many, many of them. You just might be using it or performing them using emails or some SharePoint forms or like an Excel sheet filling out, people sending it to someone. Sometimes we have seen even dangerous techniques like, let's do bulk data loading, which somebody uploads an Excel sheet into SAP and then say, okay, that's one change, pricing changes, right? So those are types of things that happen a lot. And you need to have a good picture of, where are all the master data processes and how do we which ones are targeted for improvement and which ones should be improved. Okay, some prioritization would be very useful. And so once that you have a picture, it may be somewhat imposing, but it's something you need to do if you have an initiative to improve master data management. The next step is to really build the business case, right? So given that there is enough pain and improvement potential, how do we go about building a business case? This is something that a lot of when we work with our customers or even companies, organizations that want to adopt, do something about it, they will come to us saying, hey, what's the process for building up a business case? This is a very simplified picture of the business case. So if you're embarking on a master data excellence initiative, you typically are at this place where we have a lot of process costs and we also have some other costs. And we'll go through some examples because of issues with our master data or master data processes. And so it's pretty high right now. So that's when people think about we need to do something about it. And then you want to implement something, a solution or an approach. Doesn't matter. You could even do it using many techniques. Okay. It doesn't have to be like an MDM solution or anything like that. But it's a lot easier with an MDM solution. But at a minimum, once you deploy it and once you start using it, you need to arrive at a much lower process cost and a much lower other costs, like which are costs that are incurred by the company due to poor master data. Okay. You need to be very low. And that savings is what will actually allow you to justify to build up or persuade your organization to set up something, right? To do a project or to set up an initiative. Because any initiative has an investment. You need to put in some money, time, that is a given, right? So, and hopefully that is much, much lower than what the savings that you're able to realize. Okay. So it's a very simple, it's nothing magical about business cases. The thing with or hard thing about business cases is how do you build up is you need to know what the costs are like today, right? What these process costs are, what these other costs due to poor master data. And that one way to do that is, you can really look at, what are some of the key processes that are master data processes that are really increasing our process costs. And you can, as you can see, right, there is new material creation is very because of the number of NPI materials that are created, just so that, this is just an example, so that you can get a picture of what happens. I mean, so it's a pretty expensive process because of the scope of what we have seen in the previous one. On the other hand, pricing changes are very simple, but there are, thousands of them on a given year, right? So you need to have a picture of this. You do a little bit of process analysis and get an estimated number. You don't have to get bogged down with analysis paralysis, but just to get to a reasonable picture, what is our total process cost for master data processes, right? So here you can see there are a couple of million a year. I mean, not uncommon, if you have a complex enough organization, but that's how much it costs, right? And then you have other business costs. This is something that, you'll have to do a little bit of analysis and work with your business teams, observe or understand what had actually happened, and tied back to the root cause, which is poor master data, right? Sometimes if you have even one duplicate material number, it does immediately increases inventory costs. Poor master data can also lead to lots of operational issues. If you have a few examples here, you can calculate it and provide that as the other costs in this thing, right? So we have process costs, which is in blue, other costs, which is in green. These other costs are typically manifested in these issues, operational issues in the business. Okay, so once you have that, you can go ahead, understand, what the investment is. It could be, bulk of it, in our opinion, is it's not as much, the solution as it's, people have to spend time improving these things, doing process analysis, setting up the systems and digitizing certain workflows, right? But you will put in some money, right? Money and time. And time is money, so it'll show up as investment. And one thing that we routinely find is that if your investment is not practical, there is no way you can move on these types of initiatives. So it should be as try to get to as low as possible. Ideally, whatever you're investing should pay itself within like 6 months, max 1 year. Otherwise, these days, in general, things are easy enough that you should be able to achieve it. Only then your business case makes sense. Okay, these are some elements that you should think of when you're thinking of putting in a solution for master data excellence. Okay, so that's how you'd go around building the business case. And then one of the things that we do want to highlight here is what is different about supply chain master data. So most of you probably are coming with some master data approaches where there's an Excel sheet, people are filling it, it comes back to some master data team, and then you'd go ahead and update it. Or you may actually have some integration program, you have some upload utilities. We have seen solutions that upload directly into SAP, calling itself like an MDM process solution. Those are all, for us, are a poor match to supply chain master data. Now, the thing that is different about supply chain master data is supply chain master data is almost always an end-to-end business process. It is definitely not entering data into an Excel sheet, and then it goes to somebody else, and then they will fill it into the various systems, or even data loading, right? For us, when we think of master data process, it looks something like this, which is, there is actually a process to initiate, even parts, products. You can even, many of our high-tech customers, for them, there is no such thing as master data at all, process. For them, new product introduction is a business, it's done as like an engineering workflow, and master data is automatically part of that. It is less so in food and beverages and pharma. Many of our customers, they consider this as there's an R&D that happens side by side with new product introduction. But they interoperate between those two, right? So you have to consider this as a process, and it begins with a request or initiation of a new product introduction project and ends with releasing a material when the material is ready to be produced and sold in different regions that the company wants to operate. And in between is all the steps that are involved in pursuing that new product introduction, right? And master data is an integral part of it. And part of that, you may do it some certain reviews, you might have some loops within, you may have to do like inspection plans, design, right? Get UPC, GTIN codes, use them, get input from cross-functional teams. Your master data process needs to incorporate all of these as much as possible and make it as simple as possible for people to come. It's only then there should be no what we'd call considered non-value added activity. There should be nobody sending and putting an Excel sheet and then retyping all that information with all the errors. And many times we find errors in those Excel sheets into ERP and planning and MES systems and suffer the consequences. So no reason to have non-value added activities. So that's how you can actually, if you approach it as a process, you can actually get to the improvement potential that we are talking about, which is what the business case or business case is built on. So always approach it as an end-to-end process. And then, we're going to show a quick demo just to give you what an end-to-end process looks like, right? So this is our, as you can see, MDM solution. A lot of that, if you notice here, are set up as different workflows. Of course, the core master data is also here. The various aspects of it, core master data like manufacturers, suppliers, that's all there. So if I pick the list of suppliers here, you will see many and all the master data with respect to the suppliers, right? The different, not only master data, but some of the organizational information. Some cases you may even have to look at the profiles, locations, especially if you're working with suppliers and so on, right? So you have all of that. But if you think of master data, approaching master data as like a business process, a good example here is if you want a new request, right? SKU request. It can happen in distribution or pharma or food and beverages. So you can kick off as a workflow here. So if you think of this workflow, it guides people through. It has different elements in it, which is, submitting the request, creating assigning a material number because it may be external material numbers. You can have data preparation inputs coming from finance, sales ops, demand planning, right? Then it comes to master data review, people agree it, and then it can actually use that information that people are providing to go ahead and complete the end-to-end process that we can think of. So we look at that as a couple of examples here. So if I come in and request, you'd want to provide um, make it as simple as possible, right? You do need required information, right? So let's go ahead and select some basic stuff. Internal site. There is no need for artwork. Let's say it says no. And then the other thing that you'd want to do it is, when people are coming and selecting, simplify as much as possible. We'll cover that in a little bit upcoming. And so there's a finished product, right? So the material groups or basic units of measures are already created, set up. So minimize those defaults that people have to select, right? So I'm going to pick one, and let's say kilogram, and then submit it. Save changes and submit it, right? So it goes and asks the next performer. So when you're thinking of workflows, it pulls together people at the right time, right? Correct people at the correct time. I'm going to go ahead and given the need. Okay, so let's call it today is 04/17/2025. That's a material number. A lot of times we've seen people, we've had to help our customers set up like sequencing numbers or smart part numbers based upon certain selections, or even ask ERP systems for assign a part number and get it material numbers. So, but here, we'll just go ahead and complete it. Then let's do that, submit it. And the workflow is continuing on, right? So as you can see, it actually went ahead and created that basic view in SAP, right? So it's got that number. And now we are ready to the next step, which is, getting inputs from different people. Just to give you an idea, so I'm going to pick one existing one. Okay, and show you once it's all done, right? It actually went ahead and created the material. So this, when you think of that long workflow that we've shown, that's all represented here as part of the overall setup, right? Which is, we create the material in primary plans, we'll set up the characteristics, and people that are coming with SAP as the core ERP, you have to extend, if you want to sell it in different countries or manufacture in different plants or distribute from different plants, you need to extend that material to all those places. You need to set up quality inspection plans. You have to create the recipe, BOM, all of that. The workflow can orchestrate, often directly talk to based upon the information that we have here, which is collected. So you think about it, business requested it, we use that information to arrive at all the different core master data that you need. People don't need to worry about it. It's automatically done, and use that to complete the end-to-end process here, right? So instead of people struggling for 30, 40, 50 days and having to go in and out of different systems, the workflow itself will orchestrate that whole process, often does the job by itself, right? So that's one way you can take a 50, 60-day process and compress it into 5 days with minimal effort. So in terms of process improvements, in our experience, workflows are central to achieving the process improvements and the cost that it takes, right, to run these things. And that's big place where you can actually justify the investment that you want. Okay, so let's look at, go back to our deck. This is where one of the things that we were talking is a lot of people, when they start off supply chain master data excellence initiatives, think of, hey, we need to really improve the quality of our master data. And quality is a very big term here, right? Quality includes all the elements, assessment facets that we have seen. So we call it pursuit of perfect master data. The question to ask is, how do we, so you are where you are today, your existing supply chain master data needs a lot of cleanup, but you also want to be in a position where you're not creating poor master data in beginning, right? So if you think of two places where really your pursuit should focus is on error proofing, which is, why should there be even problems, right? There should be zero errors when you're doing it. But since you already have some existing master data, you may have to clean up your corrections, right? Error corrections. So this is, we consider it as like a two-pronged approach. One is when you're creating it, make sure it doesn't happen at all. And if you already have some problematic master data, how do we do it? And how do you set up something to do it? So we recommend, and workflows are some of the best ways to do this, is the concept of poka-yoke. If you're coming from manufacturing world, poka-yoke is a Japanese word for error proofing. You really want to make it impossible to make errors. Like in manufacturing and assembly lines, they use a lot of these techniques so that the wrong bolt shows up into ends up in the wrong place, right? So there are lots of techniques. We consider some of these as the best way. Like you need to simplify the input, as much default values, drop down values makes it a lot easier. Dependent auto selection based upon logic. If I pick the example that we've seen, finished goods, the unit of measure is automatically selected to each, things like that. A lot of times our customers set up calculations for material descriptions because they don't want people to arbitrarily enter something. Types, data types, min, max, all of these is an approach within the workflow that you can use to make it impossible to create errors when you're creating or updating master data. Okay. The second, actually, it's a place where we would love to have Justin. Justin, thank you for joining. Provide some of your thoughts on how you accomplish. This is a technique that, let me come back to our presentation.
Setting up new master data, which, while important, this is focusing more on fixing master data that's in the system. So we've been using Zflow for this for a while now. I probably maybe the past year or so, for error correction. And the basic concept is that we want to take any any errors that we find and correct them as soon as possible. So we have a few different processes that we run through this, and one is that if we can decide what the correct value should be, then we just let the system fix it for us. And so those kind of run like jobs, and they monitor the data. And if a user makes an error, then it will just correct it. So that's immediately doing it when the job runs. But we also have some other ones where the system can't tell what the correct value is, but we know something's wrong with the data. And in those cases, what we've done is we've created a workflow similar to the setup, but it's going to somebody to review and make corrections. And then once they decide and make that correction, it will update it directly back in SAP for them. So using both of those, we can kind of monitor and correct the data for any errors that are happening, let's say, regularly. So one of the thoughts going into this, it kind of jumps back to what Chris was talking about with value is what ones are happening enough that it's beneficial to set this up, right? So obviously, if it happens one time, we don't want to build a whole process around it. So this is more related to things that we continually see happen. Ideally, we don't want these things to continually happen, right? So we're trying to do the upfront work that Chris talked through, and training and error proofing workflows. So we still continue down that path, but there's just some areas where it's maybe more complex, and the user is somehow able to get errors through continually. So those are the ones we focus on for this. We have, let's say, about 10 of them at the moment that are running each day, and they do this job. For us, we are using actually very similar to what this chart's showing here, where we have a OTC system, a manufacturing system, we have PLM, all SAP, and then we're using all of these tools to monitor that. So we check and monitor the data, we report it out, and then we do the auto correction where applicable. And then one other thing we do in our reporting from this is we show like how many things we've corrected, how many new things we've set up. So that kind of comes back to that value as well. We know before we said it might, if you look at new product development, maybe we said before it took X number of days, and now it's being completed in Y number of days, right? So we can report that out. And that's basically what we're doing here. So anything that fails, we could call these different data correction workflows and correct them automatically, which will update any of those systems.
Right.
I don't know, Chris, if you had any, or if anyone has any questions, or if you had any other points that I may have missed.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I'll close it off. Thanks,
Sure.
Justin. It's I know what a lot of our insight, is based upon inspiration for this is based on some of what we've observed you guys do. So it's great. It's pretty effective in our opinion. But as you pointed out, the goal is to get to this, if you are really successful, there should be no error correction workflows. So thank you.
Right. Yeah. And part of that is just making the right decision, right? When you find errors, and tracking that we had errors. So, and then you can try to decide what the best approach is. And obviously, if you can correct it up front in the incoming process, then those errors don't happen anymore.
Yep.
That's the best case.
Right. But we're also living in a real world, so so it's
Exactly.
good to have both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. And so yeah, as we continue, one of the most important things that you have to do post this process improvement master data excellence initiative is to validate the business case. So when we are thinking about validating the business case, let's say you have, before you embark on this initiative and you've fully adopted, implemented something, you have a picture before, like let's take the example of finished goods, right? You are at a certain stage before this initiative from a overall assessment perspective, completeness, validity, sales readiness. At a minimum, you should continue doing this assessment. When it can be weekly or once a month is good enough, in our opinion, and should see improvement across the board, ideally approaching as high a number as possible to 100, as close a number as possible to 100, right? So that's one way. This assessment approach is not a one-time deal. You should let it run, continue as you're doing, as you're running your business, right? So it's a core um, performance indicator that you should keep in place and see the improvement post this initiative. So this comes to master data. And then the next thing you need to really look at is, hey, how are our processes doing, right? Have we achieved our improvement in overall cycle time? Also do we have a good picture? Because this is something about continuous improvement, right? You need to continue improving. So which activities in that process are taking the most amount of time? Can we focus on improving that, right? So these metrics are also something that become your data source for validating to the business. Most likely your CIO is going to ask, hey, you've spent this much time and money, show me the results. And you need to show both of these, master data improvement and master data process improvement. And so yeah, that's like the overall cycle of master data excellence initiative when we think about it, right? From starting from where we are today and where you want to end up from an improvement perspective. So with that, we're going to pause the session for any Q&A. Please go ahead and fire away any questions. You can type that into your Q&A chat portion. And if we see any, let's see if we have any questions here. No questions yet. One question that comes up is a lot of people ask, just to get even started, we need to do a master data assessment. So let's go back to that master data assessment, right? What are some of the easier ways to do this? And this, unfortunately, we have seen people spend more time and money doing this than just improving the process, right? They just do it and then forget about the improvement. It can be, if you don't have the correct tooling, the question that comes out is ask is, hey, can we just do this first? And can we use what you already have? The process solution that we were showing. And yes, you can absolutely use, we actually have several tools now that bring all the data in and actually even the profiling and assessment frameworks. So you can design rules. The only thing is, we do need to be able to access your operational systems and get the data. But yes, you can, whether you're not you are implementing anything long term, even for assessment, you can use some of the tools that we just showed. A lot of times you just need the database and a framework to design assessments and run the rules against those assessments. Okay, and that will give you a picture of what is that you really need to focus on from an improvement perspective. You really need this as a starting point for any initiatives that you want to do it, right? The other time people get past this, and this often happens with us, right? Is there are some processes that are so problematic for customers that the starting point is, hey, we really need to improve this process. Which means, we are going to design like a workflow, make it a lot more collaborative. A workflow should coordinate and provide integration to all the solutions as part of the workflow. And then we realize that process improvement first. Okay. So you can look at it as both ways. If the process is problematic enough that it is a real obstacle for business, you can start with the process improvement. But if you want to really look at existing master data, you can also start that with the tools that we just showed. Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. Today. So yeah, if there are no more questions, what we are going to do is close out this session. Once the recording is available, we normally prepare a page where you can download this presentation and look at the videos. So we will, once it is prepared, most likely it'll be by Monday next week, because we do get the video recording tomorrow. We have to clean it out and publish it. And PDF of this presentation will be available in the download pages. Okay, you should get an email with that information, so that you can, please feel free to use the content as you feel applicable within, when you're setting up a case or when you want to make a point internally within your organization. If you have any questions, one thing, a lot of people want to try, both for a process improvement idea or master data assessment ideas, we would be more than happy to support test drives or pilots. Both of them are fairly free, and you can use our systems as much as you want for as long as you need to test out some of your concepts or see if it is applicable, right? So if you have any, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to support. Okay. With that, we're going to close out the session. Thank you again. Thanks for the time. Please look for an email with the download and the content. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Justin.